Hi. And I'm gonna turn it over and let them introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Nancy Gutierrez. I'm here with Community Schools of North Central Washington.
Hi everyone, Joseph Hunter. I'm with Thriving Together at CW. I'm a recovery advocacy manager. I'm also a person with lived experience with addiction, mental health, substance abuse, all incarceration, and have almost 10 years of recovery, and excited to talk about stigma. Really excited to talk about
it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Jo Ibarra Vega. I work at Quincy Community Health Center, which is a satellite of Moses Lake Community Health Center. And my title is Outreach and Behavioral Health Coordinator. So that means I do outreach primarily with farm worker populations, Spanish-speaking populations, but not exclusively to that population. And then my other gig, my side gig, is that I also do behavioral health consultations with our medical providers. So if they are, I think I was just chatting with some folks here about what that looks like. And it's kind of like probably late at night when everybody's gone and you have a crisis, you get that call. That would be me. I get those calls. Or something really like incredible. I'll get a call like, hey, can you come over like right now? And I'll do behavioral health consultations and I've been for 23 years.
Okay. First two questions are the full panel. Question number one, in your own words, what is mental health stigma and where do you see it show up most in our community?
I was like, yes. For what is mental health stigma, I would just keep it short of like the negative perception on mental health. To keep it very generic. And in my field, where I see it the most would be with the parents, just a little bit more like a little bit older than the millennials, but still have little kiddos at school. It's where I see that bigger barrier between generations.
I would say I always call stigma the silent killer. As somebody who faced stigma for many years in my life, I think it shows up. For me, it showed up in my parents, and then it showed up in schooling, and then it showed up in the carceral setting, and then treatment facilities. It shows up everywhere, and it's like she said, it's a negative outlook on something. And the harder part is I even stigmatized myself, so it showed up in myself, and that was something that I didn't see I was doing for many years, and it prevented me from seeking help, getting resources, asking my family, being honest. It really it makes things very difficult for somebody looking for any type of supportive services.
And I love that point about stigma being personal, because I think stigma comes in three ways. So I do a lot of dinamicas or things to get people into the conversation. So if you guys would just really quickly get your finger out and put it on your forehead like this. And so just like this is kind of having a mark. We have a mark. We can put our hands down, but just having a mark that there's something different about us from the community looking at me, stigma, and also, like you mentioned, having stigma about how I'm seeing myself and viewing myself because of somehow being different, and having like a mark, right? So it's that stigma, and also that you're being seen as kind of like subhuman, or something's wrong with you. And I think that you're weak somehow. So that for me, I see stigma being in multiple ways coming at you. So yeah, I think that's the simple way that I view it. So.
Sure. Thank you. Question number two, why does stigma matter so much? How does it directly prevent people from getting the help they need?
Don't you wanna go first?
Yeah, for me, think of all those places that I discussed in the last question where I faced stigma, and eventually I got to the point where I started believing it, right, about myself. Like, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve it, I'm just a junkie. I'm a criminal, I'm a inmate at a jail, like all those words that we would hear in our community that were common forms of language were stigmatizing me internally that would prevent me from feeling any sort of positiveness about myself and ultimately losing all hope. Yeah.
Aside from all the other barriers we've kind of listened about today, systematic barriers, I feel like it's the biggest barrier we place on ourselves. Having to deal with our own stigma or stigma that, you know, someone might comment something and it's like, oh, I actually am going through that, you just don't know. And it just intimidates you and, you know, you like it just puts you in this box or in this label. And you're like, well, the only way I can remove that label if I don't move it, like connect myself to that. How we can directly prevent it, I feel like by being vulnerable. If you saw when we had the open panel discussion, a lot of us raised our hands of like having experienced mental health issues, of having a family member that's experienced mental health issues. And I feel like change isn't gonna happen unless someone takes the first step, you know? So if some of us get, you know, it's hard to be vulnerable, you know, it's hard to stand in front of a crowd. But if we be a little bit more vulnerable and we're a little bit more open and we start taking those initial steps, we can start eliminating those labels, those barriers that mark that we're placing on ourselves, or maybe someone else placed on you with a comment that you felt was a little attacking.
Yeah, I think, how does stigma keep us from it? I'll just give you an everyday example. Of, in particular, when I see young men, older men, we've, I think, as a community, oftentimes, we have laid a really heavy burden on that community, that they have to present as strong and they're not vulnerable, they can't be weak. They have to be this, you know, this rock for everyone, this pillar. And that's that heavy burden that we put on them is stigma as well, because that oftentimes keeps them from coming in, right? So you know, people who might come in and, you know, they might have a family and they seem very strong. And when they come in, they're like, you know what, I didn't want to come, I want to come at night. Can I see you when nobody's here? It's because I don't want anybody watching that I come in to see you. And I think for them, they don't want their wife or their children or community members to see them in that way, but they're aware that they needed to come in. I think that once they get past their own particular stigma, that they're like, this was good. I needed this, right? And sometimes I'll see them when I think our time is done, I'll see them yawning. I'm tired or I'm hungry. I said, oh, that's good. That means we did some good work today, right? So that they become aware, you know what, this is your body telling you that we did good work today. Because this kind of work that we're doing together, it's hard. It's hard to come here and share things with people that a person that you don't know, their most intimate things. Can you imagine? And to be able to be brave enough to come in and do that, I think that sometimes keeps us. But I think once they're past that, those are the guys that I get all the time to see me at night. They'll keep coming at night, but they'll keep coming back, or they'll just drop by and see me. They won't make appointments, which is fine with me. And I think that sometimes what they need is that they'll have somebody that they know that has come in before to say, go see her, or go in, or go at night, because they know what their vulnerabilities are. So I like that. I like that our community also can say, hey, if you're gonna go, know that she works late. And if you see those curtains drawn in the front room and you see the light on, come in and see her, she'll see you. So, I appreciate that about it, so.
Nancy. Stigma often takes root early. What are you seeing among young people in schools around mental health? And what is working to shift those attitudes?
Just for a little bit of context, I'm the program manager for 8 of the schools that we serve in Moses Lake School District. So we have students from kinder to 12th grade. And then just based on what we've noticed, there's a shift in middle schoolers. I couldn't say I know exactly what it is because we would have solved this problem, we wouldn't be here. But there's just something that changes, or there's something about becoming the type of person you want to be, or that pressure that begins in middle school where it's like you're not seen as a child anymore, you're transitioning to be like a little bit an adult, or maybe you have responsibilities of an adult, but you're only 11, you know. And there's just something that happens throughout those years about who you're gonna be. You know, are you gonna be alpha or queen bee? Or are you gonna be stuck with the run of the litter? And there's just things where their mental health starts to get a lot more complicated. And it's very hard to accept it. More boundaries that we've seen, like I've said, maybe the student is very willing to seek for help because they have that trusted adult within their schools. But the parent isn't on the same page, and we get into all those logistics of how old are you? If you're only this old, you have to have your parent here. If you're over that age, then you can have those services, but then you have to leave your parent at the school. Why are you helping my child without informing me? So there's so many like logistical things. Or it's the other way around, where the parent is super open to it, and the student or the child won't walk into the counseling office. Because again, they don't want their peer that they saw in the lobby to know that they're ill or that there's something going on, because at school they're powerful. At school they find a way to gain that power. And here it feels like they're losing that power over themselves. So what is working? I feel like just becoming the trusted adult, or a person that they can trust. It's very hard to open up to someone you don't know, like we've mentioned. And it's even harder that if you feel like at home you don't have that someone and having to seek for them somewhere else. And then just, you know, there's things that we have to report, well-managed reporters, and you know, we gain that trust, and then something comes up where we have to report it and we lose that trust and we have to rebuild it. So accepting that there's like a relapse or a cycle that we have to get through, and that we have our highs and we also have our lows.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
in many Latino and immigrant communities, mental health stigma can look different and run deeper. How do you approach those conversations with cultural sensitivity and community trust?
Often, I think because I work at the clinic and we have a long history of working with farm worker populations. I think that's one of the gifts that we have, that we already have the trust of the community from working within the clinic. So we have that trusted community, and that helps people to open up with us. But I think in one of the sessions we were talking about earlier, how is it that we show cultural humility? Some of it just has to be with asking a question and truly being into the person that walked in. Like, maybe I'm just strange that way. I really dig listening and hearing about you and where you come from and your history and where you're from, what you're, you know, I really do. I want to know all that stuff. And I think people, they feel when you're genuine with them. And it's just about asking questions, and you're forthright. When people come in and they need help, I might have to just say, so I'm gonna ask you some questions, but it's not to be nosy. I don't want to be metiche, but I do need to know these questions, and depending on what I'm gonna ask you will lead me in the direction so that I can help you. And so I'll just come out and say, are you somebody who has a permanent residency? Or are you a citizen or are you undocumented? Just like that, and they'll tell me. And I know they won't tell providers, I know they won't tell other people, but in that space and that time, they will. And it's because I've explained why. And then I said, okay, now I know where to go, now I know how to lead you, and I think that helps. That helps with that process and with that stigma, and then I also say, many of our families, or we might be in that situation, so I also include myself in the conversation about we're immigrants. We were farm workers, or we're farm workers, as I was. And so I think those things help with that conversation, initial conversation that we're having. And I wanted to say one more thing, but I'm getting older and it's in the afternoon, I have a bunch. So how do I approach the conversation culturally? I think the other thing is that you have to speak the language of the person that walks into your room. So you might come in and I might be talking to an older gentleman, like, you know, my age or older, and there's a certain way you talk to them. Sí, doñito, yes, and there's ways that you talk to them. You get a little bit closer. You make references, and they might want to know your history. Who's your mom? Who's your dad? I always have people asking me that. Are you related to so and so? And I'm like, maybe I don't want to answer that. But then you have somebody else, like a young man that walked in the other day, and he was having a hard time talking to me about the loss he had. And he was talking a mile a minute, and I just really couldn't understand him. And then I think I started speaking Spanglish to him because I noticed he was doing that. So I started speaking Spanglish to him, and then he slowed way down. And I said, okay, that's what I needed to do. I needed to speak Spanish with you because I couldn't understand you. You were going so fast. And then he's like, yeah, I'm nervous. And I go, yeah, I was nervous too. I didn't want to tell you. I understand you. I think that has to happen. And then sometimes people will start using swear words. There's some people who like to, they get plural, really plural with their language. And if not by accident, but purposely draw little things that go with that language, people open up. I see that they open up, so you're mirroring your parenting, I'm not saying that right, what and how they're talking. So I think that they understand that. So for me, that's important. And you know, the other thing is I always have, the girls always make fun of me, but I'm always running out of Kleenex. And that's for all of the people that come and see me for whatever room, maybe it's the room that I'm in, but a lot of people come and they just need to shed some tears. And I'm like, that's so good that you're doing it. Do it here, write all you want here, do what you want here, because when you walk out, nobody's gonna know anything. You can just tell them it was allergies. So, but I think for me, it's just really using that cultural humility and knowing who you're talking to. And don't guess because of how somebody looks that they speak a certain language, because a lot of our population speak an indigenous population and Spanish is not their first language, or many of us don't speak Spanish anymore. And even though we have that nopal, that you know, that, what am I saying today? This sign means that you have a cactus on your head. That means that you're Latino. So when you see that, when you think you see that on the head, don't again guess that they know Spanish. So even on the phone when I answer, it's like, hello, it's Mary Jo, bueno. And then they know that they can speak either language. So yeah. Thank you.
Joey.
Susan.
Reducing stigma isn't just an individual responsibility, it takes systems changing too. What does community level stigma reduction look like in practice?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, when I read this, I put a lot of thought into it because from where our region was years ago to where it is today, there's been a lot of growth. And I think that growth started with people voicing their truths. And I think like I have a personal mission in life that I always tell people. It's I choose to recover out loud so other people don't die in silence. And that to me is, you know, being a part of a 12-step community where you're told to be anonymous. I sit in a chair, I say, my name's Joey, I'm an addict, I'm stigmatizing myself. I have to recognize that, and I do that out of the respect of the program. But out of that in the community, I love to share my story, share where I was stigmatized, where, you know, my parents failed, where I struggled, to organizations, nonprofits, to use my own personal experience to hopefully educate, inform, an organization that maybe can do something better. And a perfect example of that, when I first got into recovery in 2016, you know, I was all gung ho, I was fired up, I got through the detox, you know, and like I landed in Wenatchee, I grew up here in Most Lake, so most of my like stigmatizing experiences happened in this county, especially in the city of Most Lake. And I remember going to an employment agency. I was like, I need a job. I want to be independent, right? And the lady said, come in, sit down, uh, log into a computer. And I had been in active addiction 20 years. I had no email. I didn't even know how to start and make an email. I didn't know how to use a computer. And I just sat there for a little bit, like, you know, hoping somebody was going to come up and help me. And after a while, like I started stigmatizing myself. Oh, this ain't for you. You're not good enough. You can't do this. And I got up and walked out. Well, now I work for an organization that, you know, it's my personal mission to work on stigma. The organization I work for allows me to do that in a capacity that I've never been able to do it before. And I was able to go back into that organization that worked an employment agency years later and share that part of my story with them. And what they did was something amazing. They like they created a position called a recovery employment specialist. And this person, when you sit down and you say, I'm a person in recovery, they've tailored their whole role is to help that individual access that resource. And again, it goes to like thinking of like recovery coaches as the same thing, resource brokers. But I think like like when it talks about system level change, you know, you can look at stigma and be like, man, it's so hard to move the needle, right? It's so hard. Like we're gonna plant seeds and we're never gonna sit in the shade from those trees because it takes so long. And I think like a couple other examples, I frequented Grant County Jail. I have 25 booking photos there. Never once was I offered treatment, you know, and every one of my charges were drug related, and I just cycled in and out, in and out. And the way I was treated was not acceptable. The way I was stigmatized was not acceptable. The things I was called was not acceptable. But when I got into recovery, I could have walked in there and knocked on their door and like pointed my finger. Instead, I had to like realize like they didn't know how to help me. It's not that they are bad people, a bad organization, a bad entity. It was the fact that they didn't know how to help me, and I had to educate them on how to help me. And that's, you know, I was really big in getting involved with the jail systems on getting the keys to allow recovery coaches to be able to come in and access incarcerated adults so they can get the help that they need. Like if Jose would have sat down when I was incarcerated and said, do you need some help with treatment? I probably would have jumped all over it because I could look at him and see, you know, he was somebody like me and I can relate to that. And, you know, I could take this whole panel up. On stigma. I would really love to. I think it's a silent killer, and I've buried a lot of friends in recovery in 10 years. I've carried a lot of caskets, been to a lot of funerals, and if I were to say there's one gap in the community that's bigger than anything, it's stigma. It's so silent that I mean, for instance, like the Narcan vending machine, you know, in Grant County, like I get to lead that project on a regional level. And to have to remove something that saves lives shows how alive and how large and hurtful stigma is in our region. When something so simple as a medication that will allow somebody to breathe another day so he could maybe be a father, a husband, a college student, whatever it may be. There's so much stigma on it that people can't get past it to have a resource like that. It's 2026. We're in the middle of a fentanyl crisis. My brain can't even like pinpoint the why. Why do we have to get rid of those machines? And so like when I got asked to do this, like I couldn't say no. Like I am in a personal war with stigma, just like a lot of the people in here with recovery. There are so many different types of stigma, right? It can be cultural stigma, race, sexual identity. Like there's just so many different layers of it that I'm in this personal one with addiction recovery. And it's personal because I felt it. And I lost 20 years of my life. And so in the shut up argument. It's the whole thing.
Okay, I'm just gonna open up the next questions. Whoever wants to answer. Language shapes how we think about mental health. What are some specific words or phrases that help reduce stigma, and which ones do more harm than we might realize? Next question.
I mean, like, for instance, it's so simple to go to an organization. I'm going to just use a hospital, for example. You can make a Word document out of their policies and procedures, search the word addict, remove it, put something language friendly in there, and it's as simple as that. You know, like language is how I can start individually working on stigma with myself. Is like I have to lead by example and change the language. Samson's really good about like keeping up with, you know, appropriate language for substance abuse, and language can affect like she was saying, like just knowing, being able to speak the same language as a person you're working with. If you don't, there's already stigma there and you don't even gotta open your mouth. It's just how it is. So language is everything.
I'd say also not like beat around the bush, you know?
Yeah.
Like sometimes it brings me back to a story where someone was like, hey, so like, what's up with you? And what's my natural response? I was like, what do you mean what's it? You know, like, so you know, like you're not communicating. It's like, okay, like I know you're trying to check in on me and I appreciate it, but it's like your whole like tiptoeing around it makes me aware that you're uncomfortable with this conversation. So it makes me even more uncomfortable to tell you I'm losing my mind here, you know, and like I know you can tell, but it's just, you know, you just have to be very like honest, direct. Another thing that we encounter a lot, like it's sad, but suicide is a big thing. We get trained as youth mental health first aiders, like making sure to identify the signs. And one of the biggest things that they tell us is like you have to be direct. You have to ask the question, do you want to kill yourself? Like we need to know if the answer is yes or no, and we need to know if it's in the moment. And when things do happen, and when like our students lose their classmate, it's like I'm dying here. But when our students lose their classmate, like we have to accept what happened. And like, yes, they died from suicide. Like you have to say it how it is, or else we're never gonna learn. Sorry, guys, I'm hormonal, but we're never gonna learn how to overpass that. Like we can't just be like, well, you know what he did. It's like, what do you mean?
Mhm.
You know, like say it. We have to accept it because it's a reality.
I think my opening line, I've noticed myself saying this often, is when people sit down, well, first of all, I think that we haven't talked about it a lot, but how we behave, how I use my ancestral knowledge of how to act, behave, and be present with people is super important. So again, age, gender, how they're dressed, if they have mud on their boots when they come in, they're wearing high heels, whatever it is, just being present with those people. And honestly, my opening line for lots of years now has been, so sit down, and then it's like, how can I help? And it just takes them a minute, because then they're like, yeah, so good, yeah, and I think they have to put it together. And sometimes they might say, takes them a little bit to kind of pull together what it is they really want help with. And so oftentimes, I think with Spanish speakers in particular, we tell stories like this. And like
Never get
this,
it.
and like this, and so sometimes it's just riding that snail. That going like this, and you just, and then they'll stop. And then it's your permission to say something, or just to sit and just be present when somebody gets tearful, when the spirit comes into them, or when you see those tears, and you just sit with them, and it's okay. So for some people it's hard, but I've noticed that some people really appreciate it. And it's just sitting with them as they're doing that, and you're with them. I think and I think that one for me is a big one. And then some people ask me, I don't know why this has happened to me. Why is this happening? Why is everything caving in on me? Or I wonder why I'm still here. I don't even know why I'm still here. And my question is, I wonder what you still have to do. I wonder what it is that you are here to do, that you are still here. And then there's like this big blank. And then they're just trying to pull it again together. It's like, yeah, why am I here? And it's like, yeah, we need to explore that. So sometimes it's just those real simple questions that we ask, that I think that's important. And on many occasions I've asked that questions to people, and they walk away and they never come back, and people say, how do you feel about people not showing up again? I'm like, I think it's great. I think that it's great that they're not coming back again, because they got what they needed. I think as providers, sometimes we get into it like, oh, they're dogging me out, they're dogging me out, they didn't show up again, or they didn't come back. I'm like, I think it's great, they got what they needed, and if they need something, they'll come back. Because if you made that connection with people, you know it. So, thank you.
What is one concrete thing every person in this room can do today, or do starting today, to reduce mental health stigma in their family, their workplace, or their community? The big one.
Let's talk about it, guys. Literally. Yeah, I feel, and I'm owning my own mistakes, it's really hard to you be the first person to talk about it. And like I said earlier, like you just have to take that first step, like saying, like accepting the old things you've gone through, and showing your vulnerabilities, because then it goes back to like they connect with someone that went through the same thing, and they're like, they know. And they might not tell you in that moment, but then it happens for like weeks or months come by, and they come back and they're like, yeah, you know what, Mary Jo, like you really connected with me that day. If you hadn't said that, who knows where I've been now, because it's because you're losing your purpose.
I think for me, I have a mentor that's I've been working with for years, and she helped me understand, because like even I was very stigmatizing, even out of recovery, like thought I was better, right? I was better than somebody else. And I had to like take the lens off of like, and I'm sure most of you seen the guy in Wenatchee on the bridge with the bike, right? And reading the comments was just so heartbreaking, because it was a very severe case of mental health. And I had to like remove the lens of like, why is he doing that to what happened to him? And like put on that lens of like thinking like really like what happened to him. And then thinking of my own self, like I was possibly 2 years away from that same behavior, one hit, one more mistake, one more mental health crisis, from that same behavior. And so like when I try to work with people on stigma, and my own self, it's like when I see somebody acting out of what socially acceptable behavior is, and I'm specifically in, picturing like what people think of like the unhoused population. Uh, and it's like put on the lens of like what happened to that person. And if you really need to, ask them. And most people are willing to share their story with you. And that really helped me like shift mentally into this like place of empathy and compassion when I look at somebody rather than that initial first case of judgment. And like I think of like I connect it to my own story and it really helps.
Yeah, I think the sharing, I'm really blessed to work with amazing young women, and hi, Mejo in the back, is one of our first promotores in the back over there. Just being able to talk to my workmates like Dalia and Priscilla every day about things that happen, I think we're always communicating, we're always debriefing about what happened or somebody that came in or something that happened to us. And that's just so helpful. And as I was preparing and thinking about this stigma, the one thing I wanted to say for me that really kind of hit home, for my spiritual side, I know that stigma, the word in particular, what it means to sometimes be pierced or marked, but there's a very famous leader that a lot of us may have heard of, and the word stigma or stigmata, that's used in a very special and spiritual way. Somebody else had stigmata and they went through hardship and painful things and did things we love. And I think that if we think of stigma in that way, that we are all pierced or marked with hardship, and that's part of our journey here. And that instead of seeing it as a mark of being something less, it's actually making us and reminding us that we're all the same. We all have hurts, we all have joys, and sometimes it's through those hurts and joys that we become greater. We understand one another, and we understand true love in different ways. And then we celebrate it as we get older. Oh, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be here. If I hadn't worked in the fields and had calluses on my hand and broke my back as I was cutting asparagus, that hardship made me want to go to school. Right? So there's all of those things that have brought us to where we're at. And I think it's when we realize that, stigma could be something negative for us, but it could also be the sail or the wind that moves our sail further. So it depends on how we also see things. And one thing we can do better about mental health, because mental health has, again, it's bad stigma, right? But mental health, if you think about it, part of mental health is doing the cool stuff too. Being joyful, being grateful, celebrating, having fun, dancing, moving, interacting, laughing. That's the kind of stuff that when I think about what we can go home and do more of that. When I have bad days this morning, I turn on my radios, having a difficult time getting up this morning. First thing is I put on my Tejano music. My husband, he knows, he's like, oh, you have Tejano music on. I'm like, heck yeah. And so it just changes the tune of things. And for me, that's something that we can do. When you're not feeling good, find joy. When you're not grateful for something, find the things that you can do grateful.
minute. We still have questions. Should I just open up? Does anyone have questions for the panels? Open it up. Open up. Very good. Thank you.
A question?
Questions for? Comments?
Maybe they'll take advantage of us now.
Questions to wrap up with? Yeah, I can, if no one has any questions. Okay, I'm gonna give you another one now. How do you respond when someone pushes back and says mental health stigma isn't a real issue? Or that people just need to toughen up? You hear that a lot.
I ask them, right, cause it's the same thing of going back and being present, it's like, tell me how you do that. How do you toughen up, what do you do? And guess what happens in the process of them telling me all about it? They end up sharing and sharing more than we thought. And then they're in that moment where they feel that they're vulnerable. And we're doing mental health.
I think for me, I try to share a story that can get into somebody's heartstrings. I think that is the cure for somebody's stigma is to make it personal for them in some form or another.
On my end, we work with you. That's different. I'm like, it makes it, I wouldn't say harder, but longer for sure. If you just have to take into consideration that they bring in their own, morals, values, stigmas, and labels and assumptions from home. In Hispanic culture, what's something we usually say, "Es el loco," or just label people off the street, and you know nothing about them, and no, we're not considering them at all, and it's a horrible habit that I was like, I'm gonna say we have, and we have to start checking ourselves about it, and we just have to be that cycle. It's like you check in with them today, they usually blow you off, check in with them again tomorrow, and you just keep doing it over and over again until they trust you, because there will come that day where they're like, nobody's ever cared about, because that's how I feel, like nobody's ever cared enough about me to where I've blown them off a couple of times and then they never try again. If we're this consistent and hold ourselves accountable, where it's like, I'm promising you and telling you that I will be here, I'm holding myself accountable that I will be here. We are 6 months down the line, because some of these kiddos take 6 months, not gonna lie. We're 6 months down the line, and they even ask you, they're like, Miss Nancy, why are you still here? And it's like, because I promised you I cared. I promised you I care. I promised you I'm gonna be here. I still see that we're struggling, and we're gonna struggle together till we get through it. So yes, sometimes the whole you tell me thing doesn't really work with the kids. They're gonna blow you off in 2 seconds.
Thank you guys. Another round of applause.
Wonderful panel. I have one more thing. I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna make you guys do more talking to each other, which I know you love so much. So we will gather back in the main room for one last activity before we close out the day.
And I go, oh, they've not well.